Welcome to the channel. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Join me on today's video. We will be reviewing the Rdunae R3 Seahorse. This watch was sent in to me for free by Rdunae, and that's because I finally found their store. They now have an official store on AliExpress. Now, for the longest time ever, going back to the first Rdunae that I did review, which was the 6105-8000 homage, you couldn't find the actual store. They always dealt through agents. So now they have an official store. I did reach out and sort of let them know about myself, and they sent a watch in to be reviewed. Now, I had a few requests in previous videos where people have asked for this R3 Seahorse. Now, this has been out for quite a while, and as you can tell, it is a super compressor style case. And this is somewhat of a popular design. Watches like Christopher Ward, Spinnaker, Dan Henry, they all have very similar styles. So there is a market for this style of case. In terms of packaging, pretty usual. Rdunae go for these super hard military style plastic cases, which absolutely do the job in protecting your watch. You also get some documentation, you get a warranty card, of course an instruction manual, and you do get extra spring bars. As you can see, they're the thick spring bars, and you also get a spring bar removal tool. So the box to the side, let's bring the watch closer that we are looking at. Now, Rdunae do have a few color options. There's about 5 colors in total, I believe. And the price of this watch is around £155. So this watch is not the cheapest on AliExpress. It's slightly on the top end of what most people like to pay. And, you know, in comparison to, for example, the likes of the Dan Henry, you're looking at around £200. And the Spinnaker will also set you back closer to £300. So, yeah, I think it's cheaper than the alternatives. However, what you find with Rdunae, they don't follow the crowd. They don't keep dropping the prices down. I don't think they like to compete with everybody out there. For example, Steel Dive, etc. Even their previous models, they're sort of stuck to the same price. And they hover around this price range from all the watches that I've looked at from theirs. So I think that's okay. You know, stick to your brand price. And if people do like that watch, definitely they'll go out and get it. So before we continue, let's give you guys a wrist check. On wrist, I am wearing a new San Martin. This came in just a few days ago, so I've had it on wrist since then. As you can see, it is an absolutely gorgeous watch. I love that mop dial, so I'll be reviewing this in the upcoming days. So back to the Rdunae. Let's start off with some measurements, some specifications. So with regards to watch dimensions, you do have a 42mm case. You do have a thickness of 14mm and a lug to lug of 50mm. On dimensions, I think the watch in hand feels a lot bigger than it should be. In terms of thickness, it actually feels or looks like a 16mm watch, but as mentioned, it's only 14mm, so that's a really nice surprise. Weight of the watch is 98 grams. You do have a 20mm lug width, and Rdunae do send this watch on this tropical style strap, which, as you guys know, it is FKM rubber, very comfortable and very vintage indeed. It does have a really fine taper down to 11.5mm. However, I don't know if it's balanced on this watch, because the watch case, again, you know, just under 100 grams is the weight, so it might feel quite a bit top heavy. Having said that, these straps are quite strong, very secure, and they do use slightly thicker spring bars. In terms of specifications, it is a fully brushed 316L stainless steel case, Caseback, and the 2 crowns that you see here. You do have a top hat AR coated sapphire crystal. You also have 200 meters of water resistance, and the watch runs the ever so trusty Seiko Epson NH35 movement, which has a beat rate of 21,600 vibrations per hour. It is reasonably accurate, but most importantly, it is super reliable. Now, with the technical stuff out the way, let's have a closer look at the watch. Now, while the dial, it is quite simple in the way it's made, it's actually really effective. You've got awesome legibility. That's because the printed features that are present on this dial do really stand out. You've got this matte black dial, and you've got these contrasting white markers. Now, you do have this grey border in between the dial and the inner bezel, which functions like a secondary chapter ring. That in grey, I think, is quite nice. It's quite subtle as well, but of course you can get it in 4 different other colors, and you've got greens, oranges, etc., which do add some color to the dials should you choose to go with a more colorful dial. So you've got the brand logo printed at the 12. You've got automatic just above the 6 with text signifying the water rating in red. Now, that red does match the seconds hand, which I think is a nice little combo. I like when watches do that. And you've got these thick baton like hands, which, as you can see, they don't really have a border, so that is a fully loomed hand. And I like the shape of it because, again, I think legibility is a key feature on this watch, because of course it is also a dive watch, and that is one of the most important things that you got to look at. Everything does stand out really well. So I like the use of the colors, the slight contrast on the gray and the white, and against that black background. I think it makes the dial stand out really well. Very simple, but yet effective. You do have a white frame around the date window. Now, with regards to date window, I think the date is ever so slightly just aligned to the top. It isn't that visible, but you can see on the single numbers. When you do go to double digits, you really can't see that at all. Now, looking at the inner rotating bezel, I like the details present. As you can see, if I zoom in, just look at the hour markers on that inner rotating bezel. Look at the chapter markers as well. They are raised, and I think that is a very cool feature. Definitely, it's been well thought out. Due to this dome on the crystal, you do get quite a bit of distortion. Now, the numbers that are distorted, I don't mind that at all. I think it's a very vintage aesthetic that you get, a very old school sort of look. And but the fact that they had to raise them to bring them just a little bit closer to the actual crystal, that's a very nice touch. It's been thought about. So the bezel rotates on the inside, bi-directional. Now, it doesn't screw down, but I have been made aware that there is a gasket in this crown. So because of the gasket, what you do get a bit of free play from the bezel. When you set it to a position, you might get a bit of play back and forth, but that's just the gasket that is making it move. But you'd rather have the gasket, of course, to ensure a correct water resistance. Now, before we move on to the Lume, Rdunae did advise that anybody who goes for the orange variant, the Lume isn't as strong as the rest. Now, that's because, Lume does differ, and especially when pigments are added, it can affect the strength of it. I think the strongest Lume is C3, followed by BGW9, and then it goes down in different shades. Now, with regards to reds and oranges, they do have the porous Lume. So, if Lume is your thing, I'd probably go for a different color. Having said that, the markers are loomed, the hands are loomed as well. So you'll have ample Lume. Just that ring around the dial that you see, it's an added extra. Okay, so even if you want to go for the red, just know the Lume won't be as bright. So let's check out the Lume. Let's see how this grey version does check out. So here we go. Here's the Lume shot. As you can see, there's a mix between C1, a bit of BGW9. The BGW9 is present on the inner rotating bezel. Let's see that move. Very nice. I like that touch. And that ring around the dial does break it up. Of course, that's in C1, this sort of green color. But as you can see, it is quite patchy, and it has been applied quite thin on the dial. I think whatever color you decide to go for, don't expect amazingly bright Lume. I think it will be still a thin application, and the red or the orange will be much worse than this. Now, looking at the dial, that's okay. The markers seem to be quite bright, but in comparison to the hour and the minute hand, they are starting to fade slightly, and I suspect, again, still quite a thin layer of Lume applied. In terms of fade, the bezel is starting to fade out. The ring around the dial is starting to fade out. The hands are also looking quite depleted. But the markers on the dial are still quite strong. I mean, it's only a minute in, and yeah, it's starting to fade out quite a bit. But the markers on the dial, very effective. Ultimately, that is the main thing. The seconds hand also has decent applied Lume. It's just the hands are starting to slightly fade out. They're a bit duller, but still present. Overall, to the naked eye, you can see a lot more than you can see on camera. So it'll stay lit for quite a while. I think it'll be nice to look at, but ultimately it will kind of dull down. Now let's turn our attention to the case, and I like the finishing they've used on the case, I have to say. Very nicely done. There's no edginess or sharpness, and what you'll see, the watch is brushed throughout. You'll see vertical brushing along the side profile of the case. Going down to the lugs, you'll see linear brushing. The bezel itself, it is sort of a two-step bezel. You'll see circular brushing on there, really nice brushing as well, quite fine, and along the sides, same. So again, going back to its aesthetic, going back to this whole dive watch aesthetic, being a tool watch as well, inner rotating bezel, fully brushed case. I like these little features. Now on the crown side, you do have, of course, two crowns. You do have a polished end. You've got some nice machining on there, good grip on the rotating bezel at the top, and the crown here again screws down really nicely, clicks in without an issue, and as you saw, you do have some signage present on the crown. Turning this over on the case back, I really do like this case back, as this model is called the Seahorse. On the website they call it the Magic Seahorse. You can see it's sort of a unicorn seahorse. It looks quite good, you know, etched in really nicely. Circular brushing on the case back with specifications, screw down case back and a screw down crown. So really nice finishing all over. And I gotta say, overall, I do really like this watch. I think it's made well enough. Rdunae have definitely kind of got my hopes back up. You know, the previous watch that I did, I think the R4 diver, it was just off in some really key features. It had some really good ingredients, but overall, they didn't really make a good enough dish. With regards to this watch, I think, yeah, they have got some more respect back. And, you know, one thing I did notice about Rdunae as a brand, they did something just slightly different than everybody else. You know, even though they still did homages, going back to the 6105 8000 homage, fantastic looking watch. Everything worked on it so well. Till this day, I highly rate that watch. So, you know, looking at the Zaku tuner, looking at the other tuner homages, they do something that does kind of set them away. Of course, looking at the Monster homage as well, very different to what the other brands are bringing out. And as mentioned, the only alternatives are, of course, your Christopher Ward, which is around £600 to £800, if not more. And then you've got your Spinnaker and your Dan Henry's. Now, admittedly, between the Spinnaker and the Dan Henry, this one is the more plainer looking watch, but it still is quite a bit cheaper than those. And yeah, build quality is there. I really like this sapphire crystal, the way they've done it, where you do have this distortion around the edge of the crystal. However, when you do have this watch at extreme angles, you can clearly see everything. So let's get this watch on wrist. Let's see what we think. Let's take off this San Martin, give you guys a quick look at that mop dial again. That's a gorgeous looking watch. And here you have the Rdunae R3 Seahorse on my 6.5 inch wrist. I have to say, as soon as I put the watch on, it did kind of surprise me again. I expected a lot more top heavy weight on this watch, but it's not top heavy at all. The strap, while thin, it does a great job of holding the watch snugly to your wrist. The case shape is quite comfortable. It does kind of curve, but notice the case back, it does sit quite proud on the case back. Again, wearing thicker than a 14mm watch, but I think the weight is distributed evenly across the case. No top wobble. It doesn't feel overweight on the top end, and it's okay. I think it wears a lot nicer than I expected to wear. 50mm lug to lug, but because of the curvature of the case, it doesn't actually stick out over the wrist line. So a small wrist like mine, 6.5 inches, it fits really well. Two crowns, you know, they're not massive. Great profile along there. The brushing on the lugs does stand out at this angle. Again, nice bezel, and I think overall it looks like a very toned down, you know, dive watch. Great aesthetics, and you know, you do have a few range of colors. So I think I'm quite impressed. But now bringing it back to price, £155. I just wish they used a lot stronger lume. Definitely at that price point, you know, if we expect so much more from cheaper watches, definitely at $200, you know, you want something glowing super bright. And I think it is absolutely possible. You know, just applying maybe 3 or 4 more layers of lume will just look amazing on this watch. I really also like the detail present on this inner rotating bezel. You don't see that often. It's been done quite well. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, I'll leave the link to this watch within the description. Should you choose to buy it, please go ahead and use those links. As you know, it's always appreciated by myself on this channel. So that's me done on this review. Thank you guys for watching, and I will see you on the next review.